My son's out, but I can keep you company, Rachel said. And the door clicked shut behind me. Hello, I'm Ethan. I'm 25, working at an architecture firm downtown. And I've always been the type who notices things others miss. The way light hits a building, the curve of a staircase, the exact moment someone's polite smile becomes real. I grew up practically living at Jake's house. His mom drove us to practice, made us sandwiches, helped with homework. Normal stuff, but standing in her foyer that October evening, wine glass in her hand, cashmere sweater, matching her eyes. Nothing about this felt normal anymore. Jake texted about car trouble, she continued, watching me process. Could be hours. The smart move was leaving. The right move was excuses. Instead, I heard myself say, I can wait. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. The porch light cast a warm glow as I stood at the familiar front door, expecting Jake's usual enthusiastic greeting. When it swung open, my rehearsed, "Hey man," died in my throat. Rachel Coleman stood there instead, wrapped in a sage green cashmere sweater that made her eyes look almost golden in the evening light. "Ethan," she said, her voice carrying that lawyer's precision wrapped in maternal warmth I remembered from countless teenage afternoons. What perfect timing. I tried not to notice how the designer jeans fitted her frame, so different from the harried mom in yoga pants who used to rush Jake and me to soccer practice. The divorce had changed her, or maybe just revealed who she'd been all along beneath the duties of marriage and motherhood. "Mrs. Coleman," I managed, then corrected myself. "Rachel?" "Sorry, Jake asked me to stop by. He just texted, actually." She held up her phone with an apologetic smile. "Melissa's car broke down again. He's playing knight in shining armor." That knowing half-smile played at her lips, as if she'd caught me studying her a moment too long. "He shouldn't be more than an hour. Coming from the cold?" My throat tightened. At 25, I thought I'd outgrown this nervous energy she sparked in me during high school. Apparently not. The sensible thing would be to make an excuse, come back later. Instead, I heard myself say, "Thanks, that would be great." The house felt different without Jake's constant motion and chatter filling every corner. Quieter, but somehow more alive with subtle details I'd never noticed before. The soft classical music from hidden speakers. The gentle scent of something. Flowering. The way lamplight caught the stem of Rachel's wine glass as she settled into the armchair across from me. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, tucking one leg beneath her in a casual gesture that made my pulse skip. "I just opened a really nice Cabernet." "That sounds good," I said, though wine wasn't usually my thing. She rose with fluid grace, and I fought to keep my eyes from following her path to the kitchen when she returned with my glass. Her fingers brushed mine during the handoff, a small point of contact that shouldn't have felt significant, but did. "So, tell me what you've been up to, Ethan. Jake mentions work sometimes, but you know how he is with details." I smiled, grateful for the prompt. "The architecture firms?" "Keeping me busy. Just finished my first solo project, actually. A renovation downtown. The old Phillips building." Her eyes lit with interest. "I drive past it every day. The new facade is gorgeous." "That's the one." I took a sip of wine, rich and complex on my tongue. "I didn't know you noticed it." "I notice more things these days," she said softly, then added with a small laugh, "When you're not rushing between other people's schedules, the world opens up a bit." The way she said it carried weight, an intimate admission of change that made the space between our chairs feel charged with possibility. I shouldn't have been so aware of how the sweater slipped slightly off one shoulder, or how her fingers traced absent patterns on the wineglass stem. The classical music shifted to something slower, with deep cello notes that seemed to resonate in my chest. Rachel took another sip of wine, and I watched her throat move as she swallowed. When she caught my gaze this time, neither of us looked away quite fast enough to pretend it hadn't happened. "This is strange, isn't it?" she asked, but her tone suggested she didn't find it uncomfortable. "I've known you since you were 14. and somehow we've never really talked. Just us. Strange. I agreed, but not in a bad way. Her smile deepened at that, reaching her eyes in a way that made them crinkle at the corners. The silence that followed felt thick with unspoken things. Questions I shouldn't ask, thoughts I shouldn't entertain about my best friend's mother, even if she was now single. Even if she was looking at me like she could read every one of those. Thoughts clearly on my face. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward slightly, about to say something else. That's when headlights swept across the front windows. Jake's car pulling into the driveway. The wine slipped across my tongue smooth. Complex, nothing like the box stuff Jake usually served when we hung out. "This is really good," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Rachel's laugh carried a warmth I'd never fully appreciated before. Post-divorce revelation number 1. Stop saving the good bottles for special occasions that never come. She swirled the deep red liquid in her glass. Life's too short to drink mediocre wine while better ones gather dust. That's actually pretty profound. I found myself smiling, caught by the simple wisdom of it. The law firm made me partner. Last month, she continued, settling deeper into her chair. I bought this case to celebrate. Haven't opened a single bottle until tonight. Congratulations, I said, genuinely impressed. Jake mentioned you were up for it, but I didn't know it was official. Her eyes flickered briefly at the mention of Jake, but her smile held. Thank you. It's been a long time coming. She left. The rest unsaid how her ex-husband's demands had kept her from pursuing partnership earlier. How everything had shifted after he left her for someone barely older than me. The silence carried the weight of those unspoken things. I steered us toward safer ground. How are you liking the corner office? That's still a thing for law partners, right? Very much a thing, she laughed, tension easing from her shoulders. The view of downtown is spectacular. I can actually see your Phillips building from my window. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me more about that renovation. What made you choose that particular design for the facade? The question sparked a long discussion about architecture, my passion for breathing new life into old spaces. Rachel asked thoughtful questions that made me see my own work differently. I found myself relaxing, forgetting she was Jake's mother. As we explored ideas about urban renewal and historical preservation, my phone buzzed. Jake's text read, Dude, this is taking forever. Melissa's car is totally dead. Give me another hour. Rachel glanced at her own phone. Let me guess he's going to be later. Yeah, I admitted. At least another hour. Well, I'm getting hungry. She said, reaching for her phone. There's this amazing Thai place that knows my usual order. Want to split some dinner? No sense waiting on an empty stomach. I should have made an excuse. Should have felt weird about having dinner alone with my best friend's mother. Instead, I heard myself say, that sounds great, actually. I love Thai food. Perfect, she smiled, already dialing. Trust me to order? They never get it wrong. I nodded, watching, as she spoke to someone who clearly knew her well, adding extra spring rolls, because we're sharing. The casual we settled in my chest, warm as the wine. It'll be here in 20 minutes, she said after hanging up. Want to move to the couch? More comfortable for eating. She grabbed the remote, turning on CNN, but leaving it muted. The familiar scroll of headlines provided comfortable background noise without intruding. I settled onto one end of the plush sofa while Rachel poured us each a second glass of wine. When she sat down, she chose the middle cushion rather than the far end. Not close enough to be inappropriate, but near enough that I caught the subtle scent of her perfume. So, tell me about your team at the firm, she said, tucking one leg beneath. Her, do they give you the creative freedom you want? The conversation flowed easier now, deeper. We talked about workplace dynamics, about finding our footing in spaces where we needed to prove ourselves. Rachel shared stories about her early days in law, making me laugh with tales of courthouse, mishaps, and difficult clients. When the doorbell rang, she insisted on paying despite my protest. My invitation, my treat, she said firmly. Returning with bags that filled the room with aromatic spices, She spread containers across the coffee table like a feast, explaining each dish as she opened it. This green curry is their specialty. They make it extra spicy for me. And these summer rolls, she broke one in half, offering me part with an almost conspiratorial smile. They're not on the menu anymore, but they still make them for regular customers. Something about sharing food made everything feel more intimate, more real. This wasn't just killing time anymore while waiting for Jake. We were having an actual dinner together, trading bites and stories as CNN silently tracked stock markets behind us. The curry warmed more than just my stomach. It settled something in me. Made the evening feel less surreal. Rachel tucked her feet under her on the couch, gesturing with her chopsticks as she told me about her trip to Arizona. I never thought I'd be the meditation retreat type, she admitted, but Sedona. There's something about those red rocks at sunrise. Her eyes softened with the memory. You'd appreciate the architecture there, these incredible adobe structures that look like they grew straight from the desert. How long were you there? I asked, genuinely curious about this side of her I'd never glimpsed before. 10 days. Longest I've been away from the office in years. She set down her plate, reaching for her wine. It was exactly what I needed space to think, to figure out who I am without ... She trailed off, but I knew she meant without her ex-husband. Without being just Jake's mom or someone's wife. Did it help? The question came out softer than I intended. More than I expected. She turned toward me slightly. I came back knowing I wanted to make partner, wanting to renovate the house, just changes I'd been too scared to make before. Her attention shifted to me, keen and focused. What about you? Jake mentioned you were leading the historical district. Project now? The way she asked made me want to share more than the surface details. I found myself explaining the challenges of modernizing century-old buildings while preserving their character, the balance between progress and preservation. Rachel asked thoughtful questions about load-bearing walls and aesthetic choices, showing an understanding that surprised me. You've really thought about this, I said. I noticed architecture more since you started talking about it in high school. She smiled. All those times you'd point out details on buildings while waiting for Jake, it stuck with me. Something warm unfurled in my chest at the thought that she'd remembered those conversations. Her interest felt genuine, not the polite attention I was used to from friends' parents. When she asked about my 5-year plan, I found myself sharing dreams I hadn't even told Jake. What about outside of work? She asked carefully. Are you still seeing that girl from the coffee shop? I shook my head, surprised to feel the familiar ache dulled now. We broke up last month. I haven't even told Jake yet. I didn't add that he'd been too wrapped up in his own relationship trauma to notice anything was wrong. I'm sorry, Rachel said, and her voice held understanding rather than pity. Sometimes timing just ... She shifted on the couch, her knee brushing against mine. Neither of us moved. The contact was slight, just the press of denim. Against denim, but it sent electricity through me. The conversation faded into background noise against the sudden awareness of how close we were sitting, how the lamplight caught the gold in her hair. Rachel's sentence hung unfinished between us, her eyes meeting mine with a startled openness. That made my breath catch the moment stretched, taut with possibility. My heart thundered in my chest. Her knee stayed pressed to mine, warm and real and dangerous. Rachel moved first, drawing in a slightly unsteady breath. When she spoke, her voice carried a new undertone that made my skin prickle. I've been meaning to show you. She cleared her throat. I'm converting this spare room into a home office. Given your expertise, I'd love your opinion on the renovation plans. Of course, I managed, my own voice rougher than usual. I'd be happy to look. She stood with careful grace, and I followed her down the familiar hallway toward the bedrooms. But everything felt different now, the way she moved ahead of me. Self-possessed, but somehow vulnerable, like someone relaying their place in the world. I found myself noticing things I'd spent years trying not to see. The subtle sway of her hips. How her sweater caught the light. The elegant line of her neck as she glanced back to make sure I was following. This wasn't Jake's mom leading me to look at home improvements. This was Rachel, A woman who drank good wine and watched desert sunrises and asked questions that made me feel seen. And that realization changed everything about the space between us. The spare room had transformed since I'd last seen it. Gone were the towering stacks of legal briefs and scattered post-its that had marked it as her ex-husband's domain. Now, clean lines and warm cherry wood dominated the space. Rachel had positioned a sleek desk beneath the window, offering a clear view of the garden beds she'd planted last spring. Her first project after the divorce was final. "What do you think?" she asked, moving toward drafting table that occupied one corner. The architectural plans she spread across it were carefully annotated in her precise handwriting. I took in the room's careful balance of professional and personal touches. It's beautiful. The natural light alone makes it feel completely different. That was intentional. Rachel smoothed the corner of the blueprint. I wanted it to feel ... mine. I stepped closer as she pointed out her ideas for built-in shelving along the far wall. The space between us narrowed, and I caught the subtle notes of her perfume, something complex and French that made me think of amber and autumn evenings. It was distinctly Rachel, not a scent I associated with any memories of this house. "I'm thinking about extending the shelves to create a window seat here," she said, her finger tracing the outline. "But I'm worried about the structural implications." "Would you mind ... She glanced up at me, and I realized how close we were standing. "The window frame looks solid enough to support it," I said, forcing myself to focus on the technical aspects. "You'd want to reinforce the base, but it's definitely doable." Rachel nodded, but something in her expression had shifted. She ran her hand along the drafting table's edge, considering her next words. "Can I tell you something I haven't even told Jake?" "Of course." "I've been sleeping in here," she admitted quietly. "On that daybed." She gestured to a narrow couch I'd assumed was for clients. "I know it's ridiculous. The master suite has a much better mattress, but ... She shook her head. "Some spaces hold too much history. I thought I could sage it away. Or redecorate, but the memories live in the walls," I finished softly. "Exactly." She looked at me with surprise, like she hadn't expected me to understand. Maybe it was her vulnerability that made me brave enough to share my own truth. "My ex-fiancé got engaged last month. I found out on Instagram." The words still tasted bitter. 3 months after we broke up. She'd already moved on to the person she actually wanted to build a life with. Oh, sweetheart. Rachel's hand found my arm, her touch gentle but grounding. That must have hurt terribly. It confirmed what I'd always feared, that I was just a placeholder. Someone to practice on until the real thing came along. I hadn't admitted this to anyone, not even my closest friends. "Look at me," Rachel said, and when I met her eyes, they held a fierce certainty. "You are not a placeholder." That says everything about her capacity for commitment and nothing about your worth. Her hand was still on my arm, warm through my shirt sleeve. The contact felt like an anchor in a storm I hadn't known was still raging inside me. Something shifted in the air between us, a crack in the careful walls we'd maintained all evening. "Thank you," I whispered. "Ethan." Not honey or sweetie, or any of the mom-adjacent nicknames she'd used through my teenage years. Just my name, spoken soft and deliberate, like she was testing how it felt on her tongue. The sound of it made my pulse skip. I turned toward her fully, drawn by the way she'd said my name. The soft lighting from her desk lamp caught the gold, flecks in her green eyes, illuminating laugh lines that made her more striking than any filtered perfection I'd seen on Instagram. My chest tightened at our proximity. We'd never stood this close before, not in all the years I'd known her. Rachel's hand hadn't left my arm. Her touch remained feather-light, but somehow anchoring, as if she was steadying us both against what might happen next. "This is probably a terrible idea," she whispered, but she didn't step back. Her words carried no real conviction, just an acknowledgement of the precipice we stood upon. "Probably," I agreed, my voice equally soft. The space between us seemed to vibrate with possibility and impossibility. Every shared glance, every careful Conversation over the years crystallizing into this moment. Time stretched like honey, thick and sweet with anticipation. I could feel the heat of her body, smell that intoxicating perfume, see the slight tremor in her breath. The familiar office walls seemed to fade away until there was nothing but this bubble of understanding between us. I knew with absolute clarity that whatever happened next would change everything. There would be no returning to casual dinners or easy conversations. No more pretending I didn't notice how she moved through a room. No more ignoring the way she looked at me when she thought I couldn't see. Rachel tilted her face up slightly. The barest movement, but unmistakable in its meaning. It was both invitation and question, leaving the final choice to me. My heart thundered against my ribs as I leaned down, moving slowly enough that she could pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. The first brush of her lips against mine was gossamer soft, searching a lifetime of unacknowledged attraction, finally. Given form, her lips were warm, tasting faintly of the wine we'd shared earlier. When she sighed into the kiss, something broke loose in my chest, a dam of restraint I hadn't even known I'd built. The kiss deepened naturally, her fingers sliding up my arm to curl against my shoulder. My hand found her waist, drawing her closer. The world narrowed to points of contact, her lips moving against mine, the silk of her blouse under my palm, her fingers pressing gently into my shoulder. Everything felt inevitable, like we'd been moving toward this moment since that first nervous flutter I'd felt at 17. Each tentative touch now carried the weight of years of careful distance, finally bridged that bright light. Suddenly swept across the window headlights, cutting through the intimate darkness. We separated quickly, instinctively. The harsh illumination painted stark shadows across Rachel's face as Jake's car pulled into the driveway below. Rachel took a step back, her fingers rising to touch her lips briefly before dropping to smooth her hair. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, drowning out everything except the sound of Jake's car doors slamming shut. We stood frozen, reality crashing back like a cold wave. The same office that had felt like a private world moments ago now seemed dangerous in its intimacy. Rachel's eyes met mine, wide with a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read in the darkness. The sound of Jake's keys jingling in the front door echoed through the house. Everything had changed, just as I'd known it would. But there was no time to process what it meant, not with his footsteps approaching. And the ghost of Rachel's kiss, still burning on my lips, Jake burst through the office doorway with his typical whirlwind energy, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I am so sorry, man. You would not believe the night I've had with Melissa's car. That thing is such a... He stopped short, squinting at us in a dim light. Why are you guys in here? Rachel moved toward the doorway with practiced grace. I was showing him the renovation plans, getting his professional opinion. Her voice was remarkably steady. Since he actually designs buildings for a living now? Oh, right, yeah. Jake's attention had already drifted back to his own drama. Seriously, though, this whole evening has been insane. Let's go watch the game and I'll tell you about it. I followed them back to the living room, hyper aware of Rachel walking ahead of me. The familiar route felt different now, charged with possibility and danger. Jake dropped onto the couch and grabbed the remote, flipping to ESPN while launching into his story. So first the alternator light comes on, right? But Melissa swears it's just the battery. Jake continued his play-by-play of the automotive. Crisis, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of tension in the room. I made appropriate noises of sympathy at the right moments. But my attention kept drifting to Rachel in the kitchen. She'd excused herself to clean up our earlier dinner plates, moving with that same fluid grace I'd always admired. Now, though, I knew how she felt pressed against me, how her lips tasted, how her breath caught when, "Are you even listening?" Jake's voice cut through my thoughts. Yeah, sorry. The alternator, right? I dragged my focus back to him. That's rough, man. Rachel returned to the living room, settling into her armchair with the same poise she'd shown all evening. She played her role perfectly, the attentive mother nodding along as Jake detailed every failed attempt to jumpstart his girlfriend's car. Jake's phone buzzed, Melissa's name lighting up the screen. He grimaced apologetically. Sorry, I should probably take this. She's still pretty stressed about the whole thing. He stood, already answering as he headed for the stairs. Hey babe, yeah, I made it home, ... His voice faded, leaving Rachel and me in a silence that felt too loud. The ESPN anchors gestured silently on screen, their movements jerky and meaningless. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, marking each second of charged quiet. Rachel rose slowly from her chair and moved to the couch, choosing a spot that threaded the needle between too close and too far intimate enough for quiet conversation, but appropriate if Jake returned suddenly. She stared at the muted television, her profile gilded by the soft lamplight. Do you regret it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I turned toward her slightly, careful to maintain the appearance of casual conversation. Upstairs, I could hear the muffled sound of Jake pacing as he talked. My only regret, I said softly, is that we had to stop. Rachel's smile in response was unlike any I'd seen from her before, knowing and warm and just a little bit dangerous. It rearranged everything I thought I knew about desire, about age, about the lines between right and wrong. My hands tingled with the memory of her silk blouse, and I had to grip the couch cushion to keep from reaching for her again. Jake's footsteps creaked overhead, reminding us of all the complications wrapped up in that smile, in my answer, in the kiss we couldn't take back. But Rachel didn't look away, and I realized with startling clarity that whatever was happening between us wasn't finished. It was barely beginning. Jake thundered back down the stairs, phone still pressed to his ear. His free hand patted his pockets frantically until he located his keys on the side table. Yeah, babe, I'm leaving right now, he said into the phone, then pulled it away from his mouth. I've got to head back out. Melissa's roommate accidentally locked her out, and she needs my spare key. Rachel shifted in her seat, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Everything okay? Yeah, just ... Jake ran a hand through his already messy hair. Oh, hey, Mom, about tomorrow's family dinner. I actually can't make it. That work thing you mentioned earlier? The crisis with the Robertson account? I watched Rachel's face carefully. She hadn't mentioned any work crisis. The Robertson account? She repeated carefully, her lawyer's precision with words making the question pointed. Right, yeah. Jake was already backing toward the door, clearly banking on his mother not calling out his obvious lie. The one you were talking about needing extra time for tomorrow night? Rachel's lips twitched. Ah, that account, she said mildly, and I had to look down to hide my own smile. I'll make it up to you both next week, I promise. Jake grabbed his jacket. Maybe we can do dinner then? When things aren't so ... He gestured vaguely with his phone, which was still broadcasting Melissa's voice. Of course, honey. Rachel's tone was perfectly maternal, betraying nothing of the electricity I could feel humming beneath the surface of this ordinary moment. Thanks, Mom. Sorry about tonight, man. Jake called over his shoulder to me as he hurried out. The front door closed behind him with a solid thunk that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet house. Rachel and I sat motionless, listening to the sound of his car starting up. The tension that had been carefully contained while Jake was present expanded to fill the space he'd left. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking each second of possibility. Rachel stood gracefully and walked to the window. The glow from the street lamp caught the honey highlights in her hair as she watched Jake's taillights disappear down the street. When she turned back to face me, her expression was open, vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight. We were standing at a crossroads, both of us knew it. Whatever happened next would reshape everything. My friendship with Jake, Rachel's relationship with her son, the careful boundaries we'd maintained for years. There would be no going back to simple Sunday dinners and casual hellos after this. The silence stretched between us, full of all the things we weren't saying. Rachel's fingers played with the delicate gold bracelet at her wrist, a nervous tell I'd never noticed before. Would you like to stay and watch a movie? She asked finally. Her voice was soft but clear, her green eyes steady on mine. We both knew she wasn't really talking about movies. This was an invitation to cross that final line, to turn this spark between us into something real, something that couldn't be explained away or forgotten in the light of day. I sat there on her couch, the same couch where I'd sprawled as a teenager playing video games with Jake, where I'd crashed after parties in college, where I'd always been. Just a family friend, just her son's best buddy. But now the air felt different, charged with possibility and heavy with choice. Rachel waited, patient and still letting me wrestle with the decision. The lamplight caught those gold flecks in. Her eyes, the ones I'd noticed earlier in her office right before we'd kissed. Right before everything had changed. Yes, I said softly. I'd like to stay. Rachel's shoulders relaxed slightly, though I hadn't noticed how tense they'd been until that moment of release. She picked up the remote from the coffee table, her movements deliberate and careful, like someone trying not to startle a wild animal. We could find something to watch, she suggested. Her voice aimed for casual, but her eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I have all the streaming services Jake insisted I needed them after. She let the sentence trail off, both of us knowing she meant after the divorce. We settled back onto the couch, closer than we'd sat during dinner. The heat of her leg near mine felt magnetic, drawing me in even without contact. The blue glow from the television screen played across her features as she scrolled through recommendations without seeming to really see them. I watched her profile instead of the screen, the elegant line of her neck, the way she tucked a strand of honey blonde. Hair behind her ear, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows. Each second that passed felt weighted with intention. This wasn't like being 21 and falling into someone's bed without thinking about tomorrow. Every moment now was a choice. Rachel set the remote down without selecting anything. The menu screen cycled silently, through previews as she turned. To face me fully, drawing one leg up onto the couch. The movement brought her knee against my thigh, and neither of us moved away from the contact. Before this goes any further, she said quietly, we need to talk about what it means. Her hands twisted together in her lap. About Jake? About the age difference? About all the complications we'd be choosing. The word choosing caught my attention. She wasn't listing reasons to stop. She was making sure I understood exactly what I'd be saying yes to. I reached over and took one of her hands, threading our fingers together. Her skin was soft, but I could feel the strength in her grip. Rachel, I said, using her first name deliberately. I've never been more certain about wanting something, even knowing the risks. I ran my thumb across her knuckles. I'm not walking into this blind. She squeezed my hand, her eyes searching my face for any hint of hesitation. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she stood, maintaining our connection. The movement brought her to stand between my knees, looking down at me with that same steady gaze that had caught me off guard when she'd first opened the door hours ago. The office gets better morning light than the guest room, she said softly. Her free hand came up to brush my cheek. The touch feather-light but electric. If you'd like to see the sunrise. The invitation was clear, wrapped in the gentlest possible terms. We'd moved past the need for metaphors about movies, but she was still giving me space to choose, to say yes or no without awkwardness. I stood, our joined hands between us like a bridge. Show me, I said simply. Rachel smiled, not the polite smile she'd given Jake earlier, or even the knowing half smile from when I'd first arrived. This was something deeper, more genuine. She stepped backward, drawing me with her toward the hallway. Each step felt significant, like we were marking our path into new territory. The house creaked softly around us, familiar sounds that now held different meaning. We passed the family photos on the wall, soccer games, graduation, holiday gatherings, physical reminders of all the complications we were choosing to navigate. Rachel's grip on my hand remained steady as she led me down the hallway toward her office. The moon had risen high enough to cast silver light through the windows, mixing with the warm glow from the lamp she'd left on earlier. when we'd first kissed. Earlier, when everything had started to change, we paused in the doorway, standing in the space between what had been and what could be. Rachel turned to face me, our joined hands still a point of connection between us. The moonlight spilled through the office windows, casting long shadows across the architectural drawings, still spread on her drafting table. Rachel's hand was warm in mine as we stood in the doorway, the threshold between friendship and something deeper. Her other hand reached for the dimmer switch, turning it until the room softened to a gentle glow. "We can still step back," she whispered, though her fingers tightened on mine. "If you need more time to think this through." Instead of answering, I stepped fully into the office and closed the door behind us with a quiet click. The garden outside reflected our silhouettes. In the window glass, two figures standing close in the darkness. Rachel turned to face me, her green eyes searching mine. "I haven't been with anyone since the divorce," she said softly. Her thumb traced patterns on my palm. "And I need you to understand this matters to me, more than just tonight. The vulnerability." In her voice made my chest ache. I brought our joined hands up, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Rachel, this isn't casual for me either, not even close." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes and made the gold flecks in them dance. When she stepped closer, it felt like gravity, natural and inevitable. I cupped her face with my free hand, and she leaned into the touch. Our first kiss in this room had been revelation. This one was recognition, slower, deeper, built on the understanding we'd reached through hours of conversation. Each touch between us felt like both question and answer. "Is this okay?" "Yes." "Do you want this?" "Yes," the cashmere of her sweater was soft under my fingers as I traced her shoulder. Her hands found their way under my jacket, warming through my shirt. We moved together without hurry, every moment deliberate and chosen. When Rachel drew me toward the daybed where she'd been sleeping, I realized how different this felt from any other intimate moment I'd experienced. This wasn't just physical attraction or the thrill of forbidden territory. This was connection built on genuine respect, on seeing each other clearly. The moonlight painted silver across her skin as she sat on the edge of the bed, drawing me down beside her. There was no awkwardness, no fumbling uncertainty, just the patient discovery of two people who'd already shared their deeper truths, finding a new way to speak them. "Stay," she whispered against my lips. It wasn't just about tonight. We both knew that this was about choosing a path together, despite the complications. "Yes," I answered, and felt her smile. The sunrise woke me slowly, golden light filtering through the garden window. Rachel was already up, a silk robe wrapped around her as she stood gazing outside. Two steaming coffee mugs in her hands caught the morning glow. The garden she'd planted in those first raw months after her divorce was coming alive with dawn light. When she sensed my movement, she turned that same knowing smile from last night, bracing her lips as she extended one of the mugs toward me. We didn't speak right away. The weight of daylight and its complications settled around us like morning dew. Rachel broke the silence first. "Jake never comes by before noon on Sundays," she said softly. "We have time to talk about what this means." I joined her at the window, accepting the coffee. Together we watched her garden stirring awake, comfortable in our shared quiet. "I don't regret anything," she murmured, "but we need to be careful. Jake can't know." "Not yet." I nodded, understanding completely. Some secrets needed protection until we knew if this was just one perfect night or something more lasting. Rachel touched my arm gently. "You should probably go before the neighborhood wakes up," she whispered. "Mrs. Peterson next door is an early riser." We dressed quietly, stealing glances that made everything feel surreal. In the kitchen, Rachel took out a notepad, writing her number in elegant script. We both knew I could get it from Jake, but this was different, something just for us. "When can I see you again?" I asked, watching her fold the paper deliberately. "Jake's going to be out of town next weekend," she said, looking up through her lashes. "His girlfriend's family thing in Portland." At the door, our goodbye kiss lingered dangerously long. I forced myself to leave, watching in my rear view as Rachel watered her garden. The perfect picture of Sunday morning solitude. My phone buzzed. Jake, sorry again about bailing. Dinner next week with you and Mom? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keys. Everything had shifted, but Jake couldn't know. I typed back, sounds good. Already counting days until he'd be in Portland. 3 days crawled by like honey in winter. I met Jake at our usual Thursday morning gym session, spotting his bench press while he vented about Melissa's latest drama. The whole time, my mind kept drifting to Rachel's fingertips on my arm, the way she'd smiled in the sunrise. That garden photo she sent nearly undid me golden. Morning light catching the dew on her roses. No caption needed. I saved it immediately, knowing I'd look at it 1,000 times. Mom seems different lately, Jake mentioned between sets, making my heart skip. Like, actually happy? Maybe she's finally getting over the divorce. I managed what I hoped was a neutral. Yeah, seems like it. While my pulse thundered in my ears, Thursday night, my phone lit up with her name. Jake was at Melissa's, she said, and she just wanted to hear my voice. 2 hours vanished like seconds, her laugh echoing through my empty apartment, making it feel less lonely than it had in months. I know this is crazy, she whispered. I think about you constantly. I'm questioning everything, but I can't regret it, not one moment. It's complicated. I agreed softly, but it's real. At least for me. For me too, she breathed. We made plans for when Jake would be gone dinner at her place. No pretense of Netflix this time. The next morning his text arrived right on schedule. Heading to Portland. Check on Mom. Will do, I replied. Letter carrying the weight of our secret dot if tonight's ending felt right. Hit subscribe and share this with one person who needs a gentle story. I'll be here tomorrow with another.